Alright guys, if you're new to car audio and you're planning on doing your own amp installation, I'm going to go through the things that'll make it easier and that you'll need to go ahead and get started doing this. Stick with me and we'll get through it. So first off, you're going to need to decide what amp you want to go with. If you want to go with 4-channel, 5-channel, 2-channel, whatever, you want to decide on your amp first. Also, if you're changing your speakers, make sure you decide that the speakers you get match your amp output. So that way everything matches up nicely. You're not overdriving your speakers or underdriving them. So your amp's going to be your first pick. Once you decide on your amp, you can go ahead and size your wire depending on how many amps you're going to be drawing off of this equipment. So in my case, this is a 4-channel amp, and you can see the run isn't going to be very long to the amplifier. So this should definitely be okay with probably honestly 8 gauge or 6 gauge wire or like 8 gauge OFC. I probably wouldn't even do 8 on this. I'd probably stick with 6. But I got 4 gauge because I'm using CCA. So difference in CCA and OFC wire. OFC is oxygen free 100% copper wire that's also tinned. So on your wire you'll actually see that it has tinning on the end of the wires or going through the whole sleeve. You're going to get a lot more current through that and it's going to be more efficient. But oversizing your CCA wire will basically give you the same, maybe a little less results than it would if it was OFC wire. OFC is about twice as much as CCA, so just prepare for your wiring. I got a wiring kit, dual amplifier wiring kit, because I plan on putting a mono block in my trunk, which is a single output amplifier for subwoofer. But you can see here I've got a fuse block, which will take these fuses, mini A&Ls, that's what this is, and you'll size each one depending on what you need. So for this amp, it calls for a 60 amp fuse, so I'll put a 60 amp right here going to this amp. And then when I install my sub amp, I'm going to use a 70 amp fuse, I believe is the one I'm going to get, and that'll go here and run that 4 gauge wire back to the trunk. This is going to be distribution block for ground. I'm going up to where the battery is, but not on the battery. I'm going to the chassis ground that the battery connects to underneath the battery terminal. That's what I'm going to end up doing in there. And then here you can see that this kit right here comes with an A&L fuse. Came with a 200 amp, but I put 150 in there for now. You're going to need an LOC, which is a line output converter, which is basically going to convert your high level signal from your head unit, if you're using a stock head unit, to low level, which then you adjust into the lower range of voltage, which will then go into the input of the amp. And then you can set your gains here to match everything. And then a couple other things that'll make your life a lot easier is getting like these wire ferrules right here, 0 gauge right here. So these go on the end of your wire right here when you strip it back, and then when you put it under the amplifier or terminal block, when you screw it down, it'll crimp this onto your wire. And then I suggest doing what I did here and like putting heat shrink on after you put the wire ferrule on, so that way it holds it in place and nothing can come loose. You can see that's pretty tight and it's not going anywhere. Neither is my ground, and then neither is the amp. So this is all really good and connected well. Another thing you'll need, like on what I did with this LOC, is some connectors. And then I like the ones that also carry like the smaller terminals for like the ground wires and stuff like that. They even have smaller ones if your speakers have like a really tiny, hold on, I'm not gonna be able to get that to focus, tiny ground terminal. You can see those. And then a screw kit, because you want to find out how you're going to mount the amp. So like I did here, you can see that I mounted my amp to this plastic board. And then I'll put some more isolators under here. And then this will be located under my driver's seat. And then, of course, you can get a heat shrink kit. So you can heat shrink your wires and make it nice and clean, secure, sturdy. So when you start, if you're using a stock head unit, you're going to want, before you cut your wires and stuff like that, you're going to want to strip them back. If you have a wiring diagram for your vehicle, that would be better. But I don't know where, nobody has one, so I'll make a video on the 2019 Hyundai Accent so everybody knows what wires are which. But yeah, whenever you cut your wires behind the head unit or use a harness or whatever you want to do, you'll basically take, so say this was coming out of the head unit right here. You'll take each lead here, alligator clip leads, and we'll just say, for instance, so like this is positive, negative of my left front speaker. Okay, and when that's connected correctly, say that's your head unit, right, or your speaker wires going back to your speakers. So if you want to find out which speaker that wire is going to, you use this device, which is a tone generator and speaker polarity tester. So when you turn it on and you set your tone, you'll be able to hear a tone coming out of that speaker itself that you're connected to. That tone is telling you that that wire is for that speaker. So that's how you find out which colors are going to your speakers. You can also take your speakers out of the door and find out what the colors are and go by that. But they usually don't tell you which one's positive and which one's negative. So if you think that you hooked your speakers up backwards, that's when the polarity testing will come in. Because you can hook to the same wires going to your speakers, from your head unit to your speakers, and then you can polarity test them. When you have them hooked up correctly, ground, black, red, positive, and you press this button, your speaker, you'll see the speaker you're hooked to push out like that when you press it. If they're hooked backwards, say this one negative was on positive like this, and then this one was on negative like that, when you press the polarity button, it'll pull the speaker back. So that's how you check your phasing and your polarity of the speakers, or which wire is which. That's how you find out ground or negative. So that's what this device is going to be for if you're using a stock head unit. It's cheap. They're cheap units, but they work good. The next thing you're going to need is also a bushing that is basically going to go through your firewall of your vehicle to pass this power wire and ground wire through. And I'll just show you. So like, if I can get my fat fingers out of the way, if you were passing this wire through to the inside or to your battery terminals, you'll put this on and then you crimp it down. And you can clearly see that this isn't moving. I'm pushing up on it. It's got a little bit of movement, but it's not going to just pull itself out. It's creating a really nice seal for that wire, so that way it's waterproof or water resistant, since not much water is going to be going up into your engine bay anyways. So those are handy. I also picked up a trim removal kit. These will be great for if you're trying to pop trim panels off and stuff, that you don't damage them with like a metal screwdriver or something like that and then gouge up your plastic. Usually these cars are made of straight plastic. Some zip ties for whenever you're securing your wires, and One other thing, so before you get so far ahead that you don't know how to set your gains and stuff, this is a mini oscilloscope. And then you can also use a voltmeter. These amplifiers take an incoming signal input right there, and it's either high level or low level. So if you have an amp that has RCAs right here and these plugs that say high level input, then you don't need the LOC, which is this. Also, if you have an aftermarket head unit, these will be located on the back of the head unit most of the time. But if you're using a stock head unit, this is what you need to dial the voltage back, which are those pots. And then once you dial the voltage back to what this amp requires. So, incoming voltage, 6 volts to 0.2 volts. That's what it wants. It doesn't want any more than that. And the signal on high level coming from your amp or your head unit could be higher than that. And if it's higher than that, then you could fry the internal components of your amplifier. So this knocks the signal and the voltage down to the proper amount for this amp. And then you can take your oscilloscope here. And what this does is you hook this up. So, okay, so say I take... All right, so for this instance, you got these 2 wires right here, this gray, this blue marked one, and the white marked one, which is your front right, front left. I have it hooked up to my RCAs, right? And then I'll find the corresponding end of the RCA cable. So these 2 right here. And then you'll hook your voltmeter or your oscilloscope, whatever you're using first. Oscilloscope preferably to your RCA cables. The positive is going to be on the tip, and then the negative is going to be on this ring right here, the outside, the ground. And when you have this hooked up to it, what you'll do is you'll turn your head unit up 3/4 of the way or whatever you want. And when this is hooked up, it'll give you a sine wave that shows when it clips. So whenever this sine wave will be round, it'll be like it'll actually be a sine wave, not a square wave. And it'll look like a little squiggle. And then you'll see the top will look like that if you're clipping. And you sometimes can't hear when you're clipping. So you could turn your volume on your head unit all the way up to 100% and you'll be clipping. And whenever you get to the amp, my amp has a clip light on it. See the clip light? So if I have incoming signal and it's clipping, it'll light up. But this is basically gonna be telling you that before you even get started with it. So that way you know speakers are hooked up, you're getting a signal from your head unit that's telling you, okay, at 32, volume 32 out of 40, I'm clipping. So I don't ever want to turn my unit up above 32. If you do, you're gonna be clipping the signal. So usually you can, whatever you see on here, go back down a few points, tell you definitely not clipping. That way, if anything gets changed, you're not going to damage anything. And then you'll check your voltage the same way on this wire. Positive, ring, outside, negative. And then you can check your voltage to see, AC voltage to see what your voltage is going to be coming into the amp. So that is what you'll do to see your gains and make sure you're not clipping. And then you can also use this oscilloscope and your voltmeter on your speaker outputs of the amp too. So this could actually clip going out if you set your gains too high on the back. So that's what you'd be doing, is finding your clipping signal coming from the head unit to your amplifier. And then once you know that's the point at which that clips your head unit, then you get to your amp, and then you can take your oscilloscope and set your gains and look at the output where your speaker wires come out, and you can adjust this gain on the oscilloscope to see at which point it starts clipping. And then once you know where your clipping point is, you back it off a little bit, and then your amp is set correctly, and you know you're not clipping your speakers. And then you'll do it again for your sub amp if you have another sub amp. But you want to make sure that when you check your tone coming from the head unit, say this is coming from the head unit, right? When you check your tone coming from the head unit, check multiple sine waves. So check, usually door speakers aren't going to handle anything below 125 hertz. So check 125 hertz with a sine wave or a tone generator on your phone app, and then watch it in the oscilloscope and keep going through different tones, like say 250, 1000, 2500, 5000, and just check them all. So that way you're not missing any frequencies. If you're adjusting your, say you're at 32 and your head unit starts to clip, you go to 31 where it's not clipping, and then you check a different sine wave, and then make sure all your sine waves, low end and high end, are not clipping. So that's how what you're going to need, and how you will basically go about wiring up your new amplifier to your speakers, and what will make it easy, what will make it safe, and pretty much everything you need to know. I know this video is a little bit long, but it's for like beginners, which I kind of am also, but I'm gaining an understanding of it. But I also want to be safe and make sure what I'm doing isn't going to burn my car down or blow my equipment that you just spent your hard-earned money on. So yeah, that's pretty much everything you're going to need. I'm not an expert, so I'm sure there's other people that can explain it a little bit better, or if you need to like know how to use the oscilloscope, or need to know how to use this, or just, you know, you could look up any of these things and be able to find out in more in-depth detail on how to do it. But yeah, this is just like a breakdown for like beginners and people that have never done it, that need to know, you know, what they need to start and to get their system sounding good, and also not sounding nasty with clipping and all that stuff. So I'm going to do an install video in my car here soon, and I'm going to go over, you know, the installation and try to make it as short as possible, and kind of show you guys the breakdown of the installation, how it looks after, and then what it sounds like in the end. So yeah, I hope this helped you guys. Let me know, and you guys have a wonderful day. Keep it real. Hope your installations go good.